welcome to Cure America. I'm Star Parker. You thought you had Jonathan again this week, huh? Isn't he incredible? And you will see Jonathan later on our panel discussion, but it's good to be back. It has been a long and interesting summer, and I'm kind of glad it's over, even though election season has kept me on the road, on the radio, and many other places to make sure that the message of freedom stays in the public square. And this election, like many elections, we say is the most important, but this one, even the president of the country, who is incoherent most of the time, actually got that messaging right about what this election is about and what's at stake. He said it's about the soul of America.
I believe the soul is the breath, the life, and the essence of who we are. The soul is what makes us us, the soul of America.
And he said, we're down to worldview, and we are. And now we have to decide, are we going to be biblical and free, or are we going to be secular in status? And we see what happens when big government is out of control, because we've experienced it for the last 18 months. So now we're in a new day, hopefully getting ready to taste freedom again by taking the keys away from those who have been progressively changing our country into undefined. We don't know what we've been dealing with. So I have really a special guest with me today. A couple of special guests. One you might not even know. Ed Corrigan has been with me before, so I'm going to talk to him first. But another guest later in the show, some panelists. We're going to have a whole lot of fun today on Cure America. But we also are going to have more than fun. We're going to sort through the noise of the news to find truth. And so up first, I have Ed Corrigan. He's the president and CEO of Conservative Partnership Institute, which I know very well. Thank you for being here. And the reason I know it very well is because I remember when you went over there and started the group.
That's right. Well, it's good to be with you, Star.
And one of the main things that you guys do over there is train staffers, place them all over the Hill, because this is an area that we want to talk about because that has been a deficit when it comes to once the good guys gain power. They've not had good staffing. And so we thank you for doing that. And if you have people that you know are called to be in Washington and they want to learn how to be on the Hill, it is a Conservative Partnership Institute that you want to see if they'll accept you to be trained. But one of the reasons that I'm so thankful is because we actually utilized your service. And we have a new policy analyst here at Cure, Raheem Williams, who our audience met last week with Jonathan, but I'm going to go into more detail with him later on some of the issues. So I just really owe you a thank you because he's incredible.
Well, we're honored to be a part of it. That's it's a great hire on your behalf. So.
It is a great hire on our behalf, and I know you didn't even do the work, but that's okay. You're doing more important work. And I tell you, Ed, we're in a new place, and you've been on the Hill for a long time. We're on transition with the Trump administration. You've been in senior positions on Capitol Hill with legislators, which is, I think, why you decided, hey, maybe we ought to get a few more experienced people here. But I want to ask you a couple of questions. First of all, most folks are upset with Washington, okay? They really believe that it's corrupted. They don't think that Washington, D.C. or anyone here thinks about their interests. We've heard a lot this election cycle about crime, about border, inflation, abortion, schooling, homelessness. And it seems like every time we have these concerns from the people, we then have an election and nothing really changes. Explain to people Washington, D.C.
So, and this is a great time to be talking about this because we basically we're in a period of transition, and a lot of what we hear from folks is, we work so hard, we spend so much time electing these guys and getting these
and money, time and money, talent, treasure,
getting these patriots elected to office.
Yeah.
What happens to them? Why do they seem to sort of deteriorate while they're here? And there's a reason for that. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned it. It's basically this town is built around incentivizing the wrong things. Mm-hmm. It's a culture that basically encourages people to compromise, to sell out, to basically do what it takes to raise money from these big corporations, to climb the ladder and to appease the establishment, rather than fighting for the values that they fought for on the campaign trail and that they told their voters that they were going to fight for. And so that's
But
Yeah,
why is that? Is it because I think we kind of both know, but I'm not sure honest answer is that as soon as they're elected, they come here and they actually go through a process that they really didn't understand when they came here, and that process almost sucks you into having to have relationship with these corporations and establishment.
Right. So you have the election, right? And so everybody gets their little election certificate. They come to D.C. and they're like, okay, now what do I do?
Some never haven't been here before.
A lot of them have never been here before.
Like,
they know about it. They may have
Yeah.
ideas about it, but they haven't experienced it firsthand. And the establishment then has these orientation process where they basically teach you all the things you need to know. They help you hire staff. They tell you about how important it is to like be on the team and do these things that you got to vote for this bill or that bill. But a lot of that is not necessarily the things that they actually cared about and talked to their constituents about when they were running.
Right. And this is done within that first few weeks.
It's right
away.
Right after the election. This is all happening.
This is their training course.
That's right.
Like when you go into a new business, you go into a new job, they're going to train you.
And so basically, but from our view, some of that stuff is important. You need to kind of know, where the bathrooms are, so to speak. But really, what we want to do, what the conservative movement needs, is for these guys to be trained on how to fight, how to be warriors, how to advance the causes that they care about and that we care about. And so that's what we're working on, and we're trying to basically help them get weapons-grade staff, good conservative patriots that can help them stay true to what they campaigned on, help them to build coalitions with their fellow congressmen that are also in the battle with them, and to create a culture that encourages them to stay strong.
And to stay strong and be the individual that they were in their selected districts. I mean, the House was organizing about 700,000 people, and they're supposed to be bidding on their behalf, and their interests are a little bit different. But how involved is that caucusing in it? Because it is a two-party system, and even though you hear people on the campaign trail, well, I'm going to go there and be an independent, can you?
Well, one of the groups that folks are probably hearing about is the House Freedom Caucus. This is a good example. And when I worked in the Senate, I worked for the Senate Steering Committee, which is the Senate version of the House Freedom Caucus. And what that is, it's a group of members that get together. Their membership list isn't public, but it's about 40 members, probably a lot larger now with some of the new members coming in.
A lot of good guys, a lot of our friends.
A lot of our friends coming in. And so,
and in there now.
And so the goal is to basically to reinforce each other, to come up with strategies and to sort of try and agree on some priorities, and then to fight for them and try and encourage it. Because the legislative process isn't just about voting yes or no. It's about fighting to sort of advance the policies that you want advanced. And you've been around this so many times and so many important issues. It takes work.
It takes a lot of work. And it takes a lot of commitment, it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of us that are outside of what the general public might know about the legislators. I have told them all the time, yeah, they're lobbyists, yeah, they're lawyers, yeah, they're legislators, but there's also this community of thinkers and think tanks, we might call them, and we're getting bashed a whole lot now, but it's an important role. But I want to back up a little bit, because on this caucus and the importance of what happened with that Freedom Caucus, that was new. I mean, this was Tea Party movement to say we need to caucus, but a lot of you are familiar already with caucuses, the Black Caucus. I mean, my goodness, they've been instrumental in making sure that race is always on the table whenever we have a challenge, so that they can build bigger government. And now the Progressive Caucus, which is about 100 members strong. So it doesn't seem caucus is a bad thing. Why weren't conservatives already in front on the caucus areas where they could set the priorities for it? I mean, when you have to look all the way back to Reagan to say that was the last time that we could actually coalesce around real ideas. Of course, some people are saying during the Newt Gingrich with the contract, but why is it that we're kind of late to that game?
I don't know. I think, we as conservatives tend to be more independent-minded, whereas I think the left more naturally moves in packs and in groups. And so I think that, but I think in politics, you need to have numbers, and you need to have groups, and you need to sort of stick together. And so that's what the Freedom Caucus really has been, an innovation in that way. And the Senate Steering Committee, basically, the idea is getting your team together and then sticking together so that you can you can win some battles, and sometimes those battles are against the Democrats, and sometimes those battles are within the conference to try and encourage leadership to do the right thing or to take a position, collectively against the Democrats.
Because this is where a lot of people, I think, get lost in this madness and then want to throw the whole thing out. I think it was either you that said it, or was it our other friend that said, I wish when the Tea Party happened, I wish they'd stop saying that Washington's broken. It's not broken. It's a well-oiled machine. It needs to be broken. And
exactly.
In that, I remember, I think it was just not you saying it, but that is where people get really frustrated, because now you mentioned leadership. We are now trying to figure out a way to keep conservative principles and priorities on the table because of a leadership. Is this leadership so entrenched, good or Boyd, work your way up the ladder, that you have to always have that battle internally? Or is this something that maybe at some point we can not be herding cats to really get an agenda done? The country's dependent on us. Communities are dependent on us. Crime is rampant. These debates on abortion, you had candidates running all over the place. They didn't even know what to say on some of these issues. Homelessness, my goodness, when the data comes clear and we see what happens even with Paul Pelosi, that this male that is now unmarried and homeless is out of control as well. The borders. Can we really see an agenda come forward, because now leadership and caucusing freedom lovers are on the same page?
Well, and now is the time to be talking about this, because basically this is when all this is happening. This is when leadership elections are taking place, negotiations between, some of the conservative backbenchers, the Freedom Caucus, the Senate Steering Committee, and the folks who are in leadership, Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell. Now, Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell have to run for their positions. It's not clear whether there'll be contested races in some of those questions. In the Senate, Senator Rick Scott is made some noises. Not clear what he's going to do vis-a-vis McConnell. And then on the House side, Kevin McCarthy
has been pretty aggressive lately.
He's been pretty aggressive.
He's good. I like
he put
him a
out
lot.
his own agenda.
Yeah, he did. And it's been a thing. I mean, if I heard one more time that they're going to kill Social Security, and I think that one of my real frustrations was how quickly everybody ran away from saying, well, wait a minute, maybe we should have a discussion about Social Security and Medicare, instead of just saying, oh, no, that's only his idea. We don't have anything to do with it. Even Trump said we're not going to touch Social Security. Well, the elephant in the room is it is broken. It's really bankrupt.
It is bankrupt. So yeah, but so basically, so what happens over the next few weeks is you're having leadership elections. You're having discussions about how the conferences. When I say the conference, you're talking about the Republicans and the Democrats. They conference together. Each of them has their own set of rules, their set of procedures that they're going to use to advance and to decide on what their agenda is. And so between now and January 3rd, when the Congress is sworn in, a lot of that discussion is actually going on within the two-party conferences. Right. And so we're going to see a lot of decisions being made about how those rules are going to work, what kind of bills are going to be put on the floor, and basically the big voice in the room is Kevin McCarthy, who's the sort of in line to be the speaker, and Mitch McConnell, but there are different factions within the party. They're going to have a voice too, and the Freedom Caucus is one of those. And so there's discussions going on behind, in the back rooms about what that should all look like. And
I'm glad that you're in those back rooms with them. And I think my final question is, how much do the candidates, as they finally get up that morning, say, whew, I can't believe I'm going to Washington. They've got their little bag packed. They're kissing their family goodbye. They're telling all the supporters, hey, we did it. How much of this do they know before they get here?
Well, so this is one of the things that we're working on, my organization. Basically, as soon as their election is over, we present them with a notebook of staff recommendations. These are good, conservative staff. We're going to teach them about the things they're going to need to know about before they go into some of these leadership meetings.
Before they go into those meetings. Yeah. This is so important. I've got to have you back. I've run out the clock, but I would tell you something. That's why I wanted you here, and I hope that you heard this. And in case the person that you sent doesn't know this, then that's a note you pass him when he gets ready to get on the plane. Make sure he's in touch with Conservative Partnership Institute, and if you can't get with Ed himself, you got plenty of staff there doing the work for you and helping out. Okay, I'll be right back with a panel to discuss some of the things that Ed said and more right after this.
The Bible says, seek the Lord while he may be found. call on him while he is near. The Bible says without faith it's impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. You come to Christ tonight, you've got to be willing to turn your back on your sins. You call upon his name. Will you seek him tonight?
Well, I've got my special panel, and in fact, Jonathan Alexandre, who is here on the panel, he's back in his seat, out of my seat. You're trying to get my seat.
I tried to keep it warm for you.
You really did well. I love your style. I think I'm going to try to quiet it down a little bit.
No need. We like your vitality when it comes to the topics and your energy. So.
Well, but others like to hear what the guests are saying, and you let them, and I don't. But welcome back. Okay, Thank you know that Jonathan is Senior Counsel for Liberty Counsel Action, an amazing group, and does amazing things in the court realm, if you will, working with the Congress to make sure that they are doing things consistent with the Constitution, and we appreciate that. And then Richard Manning, I heard you were on last week too, and you guys solved all the problems.
We solved all the problems. They're all done.
They're all done?
They're all done.
Well, then why is it that we're still in Washington, D.C. with the same rhetoric?
I'll give you the answer. The answer is Washington, D.C. is a perpetual problem machine. Yeah. And so you can solve all the problems last week, but they'll create a whole bunch of new ones for this week. So it's a never-ending battle.
Who would have thought that we would see an October surprise where now Republicans, reliable, used to be conservative Republicans supporting Democrats? I mean, this has been an aggressive and amazing season. Most of the activity here in Washington, of course, is a waiting game to see what it's going to look like and what happens next. But in the midst of that, we have some interesting dynamics going on. So thanks, guys, for joining me. But I want to ask you, I think I'm going to start with you, Jonathan, and ask you about Obama having returned to the trail. I mean, we haven't seen him in a long time. He's still yelling at us and sweating about things. But when he first showed up in the American public, he was moderating, he was integrating, he was energizing that there was nothing called liberal or conservative, that they're black and white. Come on, we're all one America. And my goodness, where did that go?
Yeah, that talking point left him as soon as he was in office. His executive orders were as extreme as you could imagine. And the Trump administration, when they had to come in afterwards, spent the first probably 6 months just undoing what he would do. And I can recall him sitting around the table with the rest of his cabinet saying, I have a pen, and being aggressive and saying, I'm going to use that pen. Thankfully, the systems of power do have an eraser. We can pull back on some of these extreme ideals that Obama put forward. But we're still living in the wake of that liberal ideology that thinks that government has to be the central point of everything. And even if they don't have that power, we're seeing in an over-aggressive Biden administration that they'll just write it into power. They'll take aggressive stands where they're not constitutionally allowed to.
Well, but we have had a wind in the sail, and there's an opportunity here, not just with what the Congress is preparing to do under Republican leadership, but what the courts have already done. I mean, these are some major takeaways. You mentioned Trump. Trump left a legacy of courts. Absolutely. And my goodness, they're undoing a whole lot of this liberalism. What are your thoughts and where we go?
Well, first of all, yes, the courts are doing a phenomenal job by and large in terms of, particularly the Supreme Court, in terms of trying to deconstruct really the entire rubric of the left. And we're going to see some more of that in this next term. We've had oral arguments on a case dealing with racial discrimination in schools, both the University of North Carolina and Harvard University.
Isn't that one fascinating? We're talking about a public school and a private school,
right.
And this time Asians, saying, you know what?
You're
inconsistent.
Why are you discriminating against us?
Why are you discriminating against us?
And the Chief Justice John Roberts actually said to the plaintiff attorney, we fought a civil war for equality under the law, and that's on race. And he made that point directly, and so that the vision that Obama said we were achieving during his election, that Martin Luther King dreamed, and as I have a dream speech, the vision of the content of your character, not the color of your skin. I have hope that that vision will be embodied in a Supreme Court decision that establishes that we are neutral, achieved based on your merit.
That's right, based on your merit. It's interesting.
Just say,
please.
To that point quickly,
yes.
the word discrimination is operative in that case. And one of the exchanges between Gorsuch and the counsel there was, what does that word discrimination mean? Is it good in Title VII, the last time they ruled on it when it had to do with jobs? Is that the same word discrimination that you're using here in Title VI? And that provided an incongruity in their mind, in the mind of the council, where they couldn't resolve that we want discrimination in this area when it came to school admission, but we don't want it in this area. If you start to break apart that word discrimination and what they've used for justice and them just attaching that to any situation they want, climate justice, reproductive justice, it's discrimination if we don't push these things. Exactly. I think that's the first shot that we're actually seeing. Let's define that word discrimination and thus justice, and that'll start unraveling a lot of what they've attempted to do in their agenda.
I'm wondering if the American people that came together in that Obama coalition that really believed him are going to come again together to say, the party is over. Is that what you guys are sensing is going to happen with this court decision? We won't hear it until next spring. And of course, we're going to follow it throughout Cure America until that decision, because a lot of work has to be done in the culture to say, we've got to break this down. There really is no reason after a Civil War and a Civil Rights Act for us to still be today discussing race. Are we going to get to the place to where most Americans say enough and then demand of the left enough, that we get rid of all racial preferences and all affirmative action programs? Can we get there? And I'm going to say, in particular, an environment to where it seems the corporates are going the other way with their ESG and their DEI, that diversity, equity, and inclusion practices.
One of the exchanges I think were very important. Like, what does race mean? It's a construct, as it were.
So what's diversity?
Yeah. If you have, one of the questions, you have a grandfather of African American, can you click the box? Another thing is, what if someone in your ancestry, I think targeting Elizabeth Warren, is Native American? Can you, how far removed do you have to be from that member of your family to claim this special preference based on race? And so when we start delving into the construct that it was, and yes, give attention to how this construct had been used to divide and to bring down a particular group of individuals. But moving past that point, when you start breaking down that, yes, it is just a construct based on the sinfulness of men, we can't continue to write that into our laws. And I think this is the first step of us getting rid of it.
Well, okay, so we can't continue to write it into our laws, but a lot of this written in has been in the court. And not in the legislature, because we don't hear these kind of discussions. So, Rick, I'm going to bring it back to what we've been through in the last 6 to 8 months of an election to now say, is this a new day? Because there has just not been the energy to correct the problems that America really does have, to say, we're not going to pick winners and losers. That's not what the legislative body is supposed to do. We just heard from Ed Corrigan, who I know is a different of yours as well, that says there are caucuses that are going to try to set this right. But is leadership going to be a problem?
Leadership doesn't lead, they follow if there are enough members tell them what to do. And so that is where the people play a role. Okay. When you demand of your elected representatives that they stand up, and it's not just standing up on votes, it's standing up to your leadership and saying, I expect to be able to accomplish this. And that is something that every single member can do. And so when you send people back here, just know, keep communicating with them, let them know what you want, what you expect. And don't let them tell you that the leaders won't let us do that.
But what about the question that he brought up about that back room? They're going to get here. Now they got to go into indoctrination, training. And it is intimidating. Some of these are really coming from rural areas and areas of business and many other places in society that Washington can be very overwhelming. Just finding a good restaurant or a place to live.
I'll say Massachusetts, Maryland are both indicative of the backbenchers of 6 years ago. So good conservative Republicans that were backbenchers 6 to 7 years ago are now now either the Republican candidate for governor or the front runners in their Senate election. So there is progress that, yes, these individuals from rural communities, conservative values that are sitting in the back of the Republican bench can move forward.
Coming to the front.
It does take a little while.
So
that's
maybe the noise of the last, now, because we mentioned Obama, so we're going back all the way to 2008, and now we're in 18, then we came to 22. Maybe it hasn't been in vain. Maybe we should have had these really aggressive, well, you and I wrote the book, Necessary Noise.
I think one thing we can't miss is there has been a fundamental transformation in the Republican Party.
Okay.
Just understand that. Liz Cheney, who was perceived as a conservative Republican, is campaigning for liberal Democrats.
Right.
And Tulsi Gabbard, who was the vice chairman of the Democratic National Committee just 6 years ago, is campaigning for Republicans.
Right. So that's a sea change.
There's a sea change
that's
happened.
Sea change? But is that sea change good for conservatives? Because some of the discussion now
it is good for conservatives. It is good for conservatives.
Yes.
Because Liz Cheney is the old Republican, kind of stodgy, and Tulsi Gabbard, I don't agree with her on a number of things, but she is young, energetic. She's giving permission for young people to take a look at a party that they had rejected and saying, yes, this is a place where I should consider voting for.
Well, she didn't come out Republican, but let me ask you, why do you think
she's
supporting some, and then others are saying, yeah, but that populace is not conservative. So what are you thinking to say that they? No, there are people that are saying, that this is two different types of philosophies, that we've now become more of a pick and choose issues as opposed to say there's a worldview. And the president, Biden, said, this is about worldview. Yeah. I'm just wondering, are we hearing that? And so instead of getting a patchwork running through where there's no real consistency in anything, we're just going to try to get what we can get.
I think, to the point of conservatives coming in and making a difference, you do have the balance that is struck between leadership in terms of knowing process, getting judges to the floor, and I'll name it distinctly, the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, doing an excellent job controlling the time of the floor when they're in power, putting on justices, taking off judges. That's a good use of the old guard process. But when it comes to substance, I think of this past summer where maybe procedurally or politically, Majority Leader wouldn't want to be so aggressive on the so-called Respect for Marriage Act, but you had backbenchers being like, no, this is something of substance. This is a very conservative issue that we cannot allow our country to fall for. And so you have the backbenchers having the substance, still respecting in a way the old guard when it comes to procedure. That's sort of a way to marry.
And that's what I'm wondering, man. And I know that philosophy of take charge, this is not working, it won't work. But I'm just wondering, remember when we were young, we learned that make new friends, but keep the old. And I'm just wondering if we're going to divide it up so badly that we won't get anything done with a real opportunity to say exactly what you just defined. If we push it, you actually said it, if that energy doesn't go home, that's what usually happens. They take their ball and bat, go home, and their money, and go home. Okay, we got power now. We can go back to our lives. Right. But if they don't, we're an activist government. If you don't, we the people, then leadership will become very stale. And
and the nature of government is to continually advance because it's a bureaucratic administrative state, and so to take on that automatic advance of government requires resilience, and it requires people who are going to stand up and fight, and it requires the people. Right. Backing them up and giving them affirmation because they're not going to get affirmation here.
Well, but that's why another reason that I'm a little more concerned about this whole messaging that populism, conservative doesn't have any redefined meaning, because if we kind of leave it in that space you just defined, anything can go, because now you have no real worldview guiding to what it is you want, and then you end up with bigger government. I'm gonna have to finish up this conversation because we're running out of time, but I really think that it's thought for the next show for sure, because when you don't know where you're going, you can get lost in little things, and the next thing you know, you lose an opportunity, and we can't this time. More Americans get from government than they put in. That's a problem when it comes to trying to limit the role of government. 100%. I'm gonna be right back. I have another guest I want to introduce you to. You haven't met before here on Cure America. And then, of course, Jonathan will be back. Rick will be back with me next week. But we're going to continue the discussion right after this.
Today, a student in public school will pray or lead a Bible study. Today, a pastor will preach boldly the truth of the Scriptures without fear of the IRS. Today, the life of an innocent child will be saved. And a mother will experience the joy of a newborn baby. A distraught woman will find hope and choose life rather than death. Today there is a strong voice defending God's created natural order of marriage and family. There is a defender of freedom in the courtroom and in the halls of Congress and in legislative bodies across the land. Today, all of this is possible because of the ministry of Liberty Counsel. People from all over America will find help and hope because of Liberty Counsel. The adversity they face will be turned into victory, case by case, law by law, person by person. Liberty Counsel is advancing religious freedom, the sanctity of human life, and the family through litigation, education, and public policy. And that is the mission of Liberty Counsel, to restore the culture by advancing life, liberty, and family.
I am so excited about my next guest. We've been trying to get him for months to introduce you to him. You may have even heard of him, known him, Delano Squires, because he's on Blaze, he writes all over the place, and now he's at Heritage in my space in Washington, D.C. He's a research fellow at Heritage Foundation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. New Yorker, 3 kids. No, this is incredible because as a parent, dad, husband, you wrote an interesting piece, brother. The Democrats are losing black men, and the Monahan report explains why. Did it not only catch my attention, I said, I've got to have him on because I think that you make some incredibly important points.
Thank you.
When we think about, the election season, this has been a crazy one, as most are, but I think that now that it's boiled down to, we're talking about the soul of America, the worldview. A lot of people are starting to see the worldview differences from the Democrat and Republican Party. Here you interject a conversation that some have tried to have, that black male. And we try to study him. They've been studying for years, but you make a point that is tremendous. There's a role of all men in the lives of women, and for the politician to try to use that male-female difference to define a people to get electional points. Interesting. Tell me a little bit about this column.
Sure. So I wanted to write a column because this goes back, I think, probably since the last election, in 2020, presidential election, when word got out that some small number of black men were considering voting for President Trump. And immediately what you saw is surrogates from the Democratic Party, whether elected officials or pundits, immediately trying to tell guys to get back in their place.
Yeah, they came unglued.
Right? So whether it's Maxine Waters or Jim Clyburn and saying, I feel sorry for brothers who do this and they're shaming their families, or professors who say black men who want to consider voting for Trump just want the power and the prestige that white men have, I felt it was a really ugly way to talk to your second most loyal demographic base. Yeah. And even coming into this past election season, you saw that. I saw there was a host on MSNBC who basically told black men to get in line behind black women and vote for Stacey Abrams. And
you
to
put
me,
that out.
yeah, the Democratic Party's entire posture when it comes to the black community is that black women lead and black men follow. And I trace that worldview back to something that Daniel Patrick Moynihan picked up, almost 60 years ago in the Moynihan Report.
Yeah, we talk often about the Moynihan Report here because of my book, Uncle Sam's Plantation, and pointing to that turning point in Black America. We in the history of this country have not seen such a shift from the male presence in the home and a respected presence to where now it's almost deliberate that women are put in positions of leading their homes, and marriage as a result has collapsed. And then you have a lot of young black boys not knowing what to do and no dad to help them channel that energy that is in the streets now, but needed to be channeled to schooling, to be channeled to sports. And so it's really commendable when we meet people like yourselves, and I know my audience is thinking you're an anomaly, but I think one of the main reasons that I wanted you on is because we know you're not. And haven't been in history of Black America. Break this down for us on how we broke down. How did we get from where by the mid-60s, 73% of black husbands were in their homes with their wives raising their children, to today we're looking at numbers to where marriage rates in Black America are 30%, and children born outside of a marital unit, it's just dismal.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Moynihan didn't report, right, and I know you know this, the subtitle was a case for national action.
Right.
The problem is Democrats took the exact wrong action.
Right.
What they said is, some small number, at that point, a minority of black families are struggling. What we'll do to make them equal, quote unquote, is to insert more government intervention, more government programs, more policies into the everyday lives of black families. So the government then says, we're going to open up welfare rolls. We're going to try to get more black women on because AFDC, A for Dependent Children, used to discriminate against black women. So we want the government to take a larger role in the life of the black family. And what it ended up doing is subverting the authority of the black man in his own home in such a way that the government, particularly on the federal level, became the new husband and father in many neighborhoods. And my contention is that the government is an absent father and an unfaithful spouse because it just has too many households to support.
It sure does.
Right? So
Papa was a Rolling Stone where
correct.
he lays his hat.
Correct.
It's a song. But I want to. But let's elaborate a little bit on that point you made because I break it down in a nutshell in my own life. The rules of welfare when I lived there were don't work, don't save, don't
Correct.
get married. We'll keep you enslaved. This poverty plantation. But the reality is there are means tests. There are tests to make sure that no able-bodied working person was in that home.
Right.
And because African Americans were more disproportionately in poverty, that sounded like a good idea to go
Right.
get that subsidy. So you fast forward to today where we have, as you're pointing out, major voices in our society that are taking that dilemma that we have found ourselves in as African Americans. 5 years after King's death, Roe v. Wade was national law. We got caught up in killing off our offspring. But they've taken now that dilemma to say, black males, stay out of this.
Right.
This is what you wrote about. And it was really intriguing because you're saying that the Democrats really do have a problem with black male.
Oh, absolutely.
And yet they consider themselves the party of those most at risk, those most in need.
Yeah.
How is it that we keep hearing from Barack Obama to keep telling us that, on one hand, out of his mouth, he tells us how important father is in the home and how he misses his own. But on the other hand, he's saying that you're not on the path to freedom if you, as you mentioned, vote for Donald Trump. You're not on the path for freedom if you think that we should limit the size and scope of government in your personal lives.
Yeah, that's a great question, and you're exactly right. You can't be a party that says that masculinity in and of itself is toxic and problematic, and then turn around and say that you care about men. And that's what Democrats do. They did it this past election cycle. They've done it in past years. It's all Sunday through Friday. It's men are bad, sexism holds women down, and particularly black women are fighting racism and the patriarchy. And then when they show up
It's almost laughable.
on Saturday, right, to try to get the vote, they say, oh, we care for you black men and so on and so on and so forth.
Without us, you're not going to get a job. Without
Correct.
us, you're not going to have a healthy neighborhood.
Correct.
Without us.
And this is what happens when a party begins to think that the government is the highest authority in the land. So when you reject God, when you reject the creation order, right, that husbands are responsible for the children that they create with women, ideally their wives. When you reject that, then again, the man comes out and the government comes in. Because at the end of the day, there's not I've never met a single woman who's thought from the time that she was young, who was raised to believe that it's her job to take care of a grown man and their children.
Right.
But many men, prior to probably recent generations, that's exactly what they were taught.
Right.
It's the man's role. It's your role, not the government's role, to take care of the children that you make. So when you subvert that creation order, you get all types of problems and unforeseen consequences. And it's to the point now where a lot of men don't realize that that's what's going on. So they vote for their own downfall because, Star, I know you know this, when the Democrats show up to a black community, they push two things more than any. They push abortion and they push anything having to do with LGBT.
Right.
And it's one of the most discouraging things because on one hand, some of these black men will say, "Oh, I'm a king, and I'm trying to do this and I'm trying to do that," and I'm thinking to myself, the one thing that a king will not do is kill his own heirs.
Kill his own heirs.
Because that's how he lives on.
Well, now post-Dobbs, because I really think that there has been a sea change, and tell me if you're seeing otherwise. You're a researcher, you're one of the policy thinkers here in Washington, but have all over the country, if you will. Are we seeing a pattern change post-Dobbs? Many African Americans are realizing we killed 20 million. It's starting to digest now. Prior to seeing what the changes were made at the court, we're having discussions now in our communities that, wait a minute, we should be able to send our children to schools that matter to us, and the money may follow. Are we seeing an adjustment in the Black community to where it will show up more than the little bump that Trump received? You mentioned earlier when he ran for office, the little bump that others are beginning to see as we coming out of this midterm election. Is there going to be a sea change to where men take that leadership, that where women will follow? Because you point out too that Black women, they don't vote for Republican, but I'm wondering if or for conservative, they don't know their values. They know they don't agree with this LGBT stuff and all this killing off your own offsprings. Is this an area that you're saying men will begin to lead and women will follow?
I sure hope so. I think it's quite possible. I think many men, even before they consider voting for a conservative candidate, will notice how they're being talked to, disrespected, and degraded in the public sphere by the people who say that they want their votes, right?
So you're thinking that because it's not new. I mean, this has been narrated through the entertainment industry for decades now. But what I'm hearing you say, I think, is that there's a shift now to hear your own politicians, including politicians that you endear, like a Barack Obama, who told us that he was concerned that he never had a relationship with his father, who wrote a book that he didn't have a relationship with his father, but now to tell you you don't need a father.
Yeah, so yes,
you don't even
I
have
think,
to be a man. That speech that he made in during the election season, he went everywhere making the same speech, where he actually put the most important thing on the table is exactly what you just said: abortion and LGBT.
So this is
really?
This is post presidency Obama, because he's gotten the message from his party. When he was in office, one of the things that he did, to his credit, was talk about the importance of marriage and family.
Yes.
And when he did, and I know you remember this, he would always get criticized from his left.
That's right.
And particularly the Black left.
Yeah, but it's changed.
But it's changed.
There's no need of us pretending it hasn't changed.
Correct.
And now there is a party and a positioning in that party with 100 progressives that are pushed now. Even though if there was any integrity left in the Congressional Black Caucus on any of these things that really matter to the communities that they're supposed to serve, they've now been pushed so hard left that I'm going to ask the question again: is this a window of opportunity?
There is a window.
Okay.
There is a window.
You think that we're not there yet? We're not going to see that sea change?
I don't think we're there yet. I think part of the reason is that some guys are still waking up to the dynamics, how the dynamics are shifting. Because a lot of Black voters, men and women, they hold on to the Democratic Party, one, because they think that the party's going to give them sort of tangible wins, right? For some people, that's reparations. For some people, that's other sort of race-specific policies. But the biggest part is something that I call the Selma syndrome, which is the combination of America's, at times, ugly and bloody racial history with features of the Stockholm syndrome. Because Democrats have tried to make Black voters feel that our interests are tied to them holding political power. Right. And which is why when they find policies they don't like, they don't just say, oh, this is a bad policy for ABC reasons. They say, this is the new Jim Crow. Right. They're going to put y'all back in chains. They use that type of rhetoric to condition a fear response with us. Right. And what I'm saying is, that does have a hold on many people, but eventually guys are going to realize these people have no respect for me. They don't see me as a father, as a husband, as a coach, or an entrepreneur. They see me as one thing and one thing only: a voter. So when they show up in my barbershop, it's always vote, 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 vote. They don't believe I have any other responsibility in my life other than voting for them. The question is whether conservatives will take advantage of this opportunity and see a pathway to reach men primarily, Black men primarily, because the Democratic Party, regardless of ethnicity, is the party of the matriarchy. It's gone.
Right. But because I'm running out of time here. Yes. So you're saying what you're saying is, if conservatives take advantage of this window of opportunity to be clear about messages of freedom and responsibility, then we'll see that African American, that third of Black America that already polls evangelical and conservatives, may begin to vote that value. They may begin to vote their primary interests.
I see that. And if I was a conservative, running for office, I say it this way. I say, look, a vote for my opponent is a vote to make them bigger. They get the big salary, they get the big benefits, and they get more control over your life. They'll tell you whether you can work if you get the jab. They'll tell you where your kids can go to school, so on and so on and so forth. They'll tell you to kill your own offspring.
Right.
A vote for me is a vote for you. I want smaller government. I want less control over your life. I want you to determine where your child goes to school. I want your business to stay open.
Okay.
So the question is, Mr. Black Man, do you want to be big or do you want to be small?
Yeah.
That's how I would ask it to.
I think we got a politician. but for now, we're going to leave you at Heritage Foundation because
Yes,
you're a
ma'am.
senior fellow. You're one of their fellows over there, and that's incredible because it's a major policy institute here in Washington, D.C., pushing forth the conservative principles and ideas here in Washington, and especially over at the Congress. And we need you there, brother.
Thank you.
I hope that you'll come back and visit with us
Absolutely.
here on Cure America very, very soon. And I better get out of here. After this message, I'm going to come back with my panel. We're going to wrap it up and see how we cure this problem. Is there something that we personally can do to turn our culture and our country back towards its founding principles of freedom? I'll be right back.
Today, a student in public school will pray or lead a Bible study. Today, a pastor will preach boldly the truth of the Scriptures without fear of the IRS. Today, the life of an innocent child will be saved, and a mother will experience the joy of a newborn baby. A distraught woman will find hope and choose life rather than death. Today, there is a strong voice defending God's created natural order of marriage and family. There is a defender of freedom in the courtroom and in the halls of Congress and in legislative bodies across the land. Today, all of this is possible because of the ministry of Liberty Counsel. People from all over America will find help and hope because of Liberty Counsel. The adversity they face will be turned into victory, case by case, law by law, person by person. Liberty Counsel is advancing religious freedom, the sanctity of human life, and the family through litigation, education, and public policy. And that is the mission of Liberty Counsel, to restore the culture by advancing life, liberty, and family.
Well, it's been an interesting time, as I've mentioned earlier, and we're not over yet. I mean, my goodness, the country's still going, the culture's still going, and even though we have some wind in our sail, we have a lot of work to do, so I'm glad Jonathan Alexander is here to help us do it. And a guest that you met last week that I am first time on show with, Raheem. Raheem Williams is a new addition to Cure's team. Welcome.
I love being here. Thanks for having me.
Well, you love being here now because you've been working with Cure full-time as policy analyst for about, 3-4 weeks? And I think now this is only second or third time that we've actually had discussion and been together in the same room. Are you going to stay?
I have no plans on leaving. We're having a blast.
We are having a blast, my goodness. I don't know if we're getting any work done, but we sure are having a lot of discussions here at Cure. Well, we are a think tank. We're a policy institute.
Thinking up good answers is what we do.
It's what we do.
So I love to take our policy agenda very, very seriously. It's something I'm very passionate about: healthcare, economics, housing, and education. I mean, that's what the Black community needs. We need good answers on these things, and too often DC has failed us.
Yeah, that failed us. Ooh, Lord, that's what we're going to talk about. Yeah, you're exactly right. And boy, we better turn it around. So you heard what Mr. Squires was saying it's just incredible to now see more voices in Washington. That's why I'm so glad that you have come up to the Beltway, and I hope that you don't, do the lot thing. And once you're looking at Sodom, then you're in Sodom, and then God has to grab you out of here real quickly because it could get on you really quickly. But obviously, it didn't to our last guest. He's just new in Washington Beltway as well, pushing ideas. But his column about what has happened to diminish the presence of the Black male, let me just put it that way, I think is of concern to both of you. You're married men, you're young men, but the image that most of society is seeing about Blacks, right and left, no matter what media you're on, it's almost like there's a deliberate effort to paint a picture that is not true. Now, we have big challenges, especially in those 8,700 zip codes that are totally broken. The welfare state, the policies that you just talked about have totally broke family life. Men get up and walk away from their 10 children by different moms. But the consistency of those that are married, that go to church, the consistency of their values are reflected in data. And I want to ask you about it because the consistency of their values say that on matters related to faith and religion and morality, Black Democrats keep polling more like white Republicans and independents than they do white Democrats. On matters concerning perceived fairness and inequality or perceived racism, you're starting to see that Black vote more closely aligned with Democrats. So it seems reasonable to surmise that Black concerns regarding fairness and inequality they have an inclination to believe that government is the means by which these problems can be solved. That government defines the answers, that government is how they're going to be able to live in this society, and they've set their religious values and basically family values aside. Will we see a change in this behavior? I mean, my last guest was saying he hoped so. I want to hear.
Yeah.
I want to hear yes.
Yes, I'll refer back quickly to Dr. Allen. In credit to what the report has revealed, there was a place in the 13th, 14th, 15th even amendment for a federal recognition of the Black man as an equal citizen. What the Democrats have done now is say, look at that federal policy. We were good for you then. We can apply it to your economic needs in your pocket. We're going to tell you what you need. And it's always been the same mindset even before the 13th Amendment, considering Black men to be a commodity, right? Slavery, they were a commodity. Now, even from the more insidious individuals of the Black Lives Matter movement saying you're still a commodity, we'll raise money off of you, but we'll emasculate you. We'll remove, as it says on their website, the Black male as being the central role in the civil rights movement. They've said that. All of their donations to these transgender groups are literally changing the Black male to a Black female. So it's from the start looking at Black men as a commodity, but it's continuing now through their progressive agendas. Even the ones that claim Black Lives Matter are still using the Black man as a commodity to push their interests.
Well, Raimi, I want to hear your thoughts on this because you're long thought and studied in a lot of these areas. You've been looking at data for your years. We're honored that you would put your talent here at CURE because this is not new space for you. Give us your thoughts on this important question.
So first I want to tell our audience, if you get a chance, please check out our Black Opinions report on the CURE website on curepolicy.org. It's very informative. So one of the things about that is there are interesting ways in which you see Black opinions align with what we would generally consider to be conservative in ways that it don't. And I think what Jonathan here said is absolutely right, but I'd go a step further. When we talk about how the image of the Black man is portrayed in media, you either have this, how do you say this wanting to feminize him and or promote an image that is far from wholesome, right?
Like
when you think
aggressive.
about when you think about like rap music, gangster rap and stuff, that's what cool Black men are in the media. What's not cool
and that's
is,
not new. Remember Superfly? I mean, come on, we've been through it all. But go ahead.
So what's not cool is being a nerd, right? And studying rocket science. That's not cool. Being married and having all of your kids in wedlock. That's not cool. I love that you bring up Obama because he kind of has this juxtaposition, right? And the Black community hasn't quite reconciled it that the first Black president was raised by white people in Kansas. We don't talk about how he has one wife, not 5 baby mamas. We don't talk about that. Even though Democrats' message is, oh, you don't have to do those traditional things. Well, the question becomes, what have getting away from those traditional things gotten us?
Really?
The wealthiest households in America are married, never divorced.
Wow.
The most likely to be in poverty are single mother households. That's just true. It's sad. Democrats
regardless of your ethnicity.
Regardless.
Yeah.
Regardless. And the
where
thing
we see
about
Black husbands in homes with their wives raising children, you cannot really measure those differences economically, educationally,
Absolutely.
crime, than white.
And so what we see here is this weird thing where Obama's kind of like, hey, you don't got to do it this way. You don't have to do it this way. But the question is, en masse, when we look into general statistics, who are better off? And it is those who have and embody those traditional values in the traditional family. That makes sense because a culture is built on their family, and that is your primary support network, not the government. But we broke that.
Yeah, but we did break it, but and everyone sees it's broken. So why is it that you have still this very large part of the black community, and it's no need to pretend it's not. That's why they put them on the campaign trail to say, go get them, make them vote, as if there's a surety that they're going to vote for Democrats. Why is it that blacks have not connected what you just told us? That here he is living a traditional American life. He was even raised by people of other ethnicities. He's living his own traditional life, but yet telling others don't do this when we can actually see the damages done to ourselves to not do these things. Why isn't he being asked those harder questions and thinks that he has the audacity, as he said in his book, to get up in front of audiences all over this country and keep hammering this, who do you think is going to be for your freedom? Of course, it's big government in a nanny state.
Well, he's speaking into an empty environment, and that's where
you think so?
That's where we can lay blame on the conservative movement or the Republican Party up until probably the 2016 election, where you are seeing a more concerted effort to realize the dissatisfaction the African American male is feeling towards the Democrat Party that wants to keep him in a box.
Tell me about that a little bit.
There has to be a replacement. There has to be a home for Republicans to run to. I like the example of the Arkansas independent candidate who's an African American who sort of stands in between the Democrat and the Republican there as an independent. I'm going to make.
Yeah, a lot of numbers are shifting that way in blacks. They're not coming to Republican, but they sure are moving from Democrat. You're starting to see this. Wait a minute. And so am I hearing you say that you're thinking it's not just that their eyes are opening to the role of government hasn't worked, but that they're open for new ideas?
Open for new ideas and an opportunity for conservatives to speak into that space and say, we were here all along. And make amends. Say, perhaps our approach, our marketing, as it were, wasn't as intentional as it can be now. But then seeing the success stories of individuals that are voting Republican, are living conservative values, and why a party like that, encouraging governing of that same party, is beneficial for the black man.
Now, Raheem, you've already, even in your limited time being here, been to some of the spaces that we work in Washington to make sure that the messaging when it comes to freedom, personal responsibility, faith are consistent. That's what we do here: culture, race relations, anti-poverty, making sure that that we're looking at market-based solutions to fight poverty. What are you hearing in those back rooms? There was earlier discussion with Ed Corrigan about the back rooms of the legislative body, but there are back rooms of the what do you think bodies? We got to come up with a name for ourselves. Those of us that we're not, but we do persuade and we do consult. We have the role of lobby, but on ideas. But we're limited by government to actually call ourselves lobbies. But what are you hearing? We only have about a minute. But are you encouraged or optimistic that there are doors opening for us to have the discussions of, we know what went wrong, but where we need to go, what we need to do differently?
Honestly, I do fear sometimes the message isn't hitting the right audience.
Okay.
It's very easy in this time to find people who agree with you and get in a room. The hard part is taking that message where it needs to be. Mm-hmm.
But that's not our job. That's other people's job, well, except to our clergy program, I guess you could say. But yeah, in those back rooms of those that you're hearing, I think most of their emphasis is to convince the Congress. So you're thinking that they won't be able to do that unless they have a grassroots with them and convince
you need the grassroots. Yes,
okay,
it's a balance.
Okay.
We're not a top-down country. You can't just speak it, eat it. Congress can't just be like, hey, go be great people, and then it all happens, right? So it's like we have to shift the culture, and the only way to do that is to talk to the culture, and that's part of the reason we're here.
I mentioned the barbershops. Imagine a concerted effort in the black barbershop to talk about the ideas that are always being discussed there, but from a perspective.
But who's to do it, I suppose? Because the policy thinkers, I don't know that I would agree that that's their role, but I do think that the body of Christ that are hearing the messaging over their pulpit pulpit if they are hearing the conservative message, which I think the scripture is incredibly conservative. I read it all the time, and it seems conservative to me. That is it their role to be spokespersons? Because I see, we're running out of time again, because I really feel that everybody has their lane, and I just really hope that as we go into next week's discussion here on Cure America, we will define those lanes, because you have a role too. I agree with both these gentlemen, but you have a role too. You going in that barbershop. We can't have politicians come in that barbershop with you. You have a role to say, I don't know that I agree. And I think that when one person says, I don't know that I agree, and there are a lot of discussions, especially in Black America, in that barber beauty shop, everybody else will listen. Happened to Raheem the other day on the Metro. He said, I don't know that I agree. And the person that was with him told me that the entire Metro said, let me hear what he has to say. So we have an opportunity to be that light in such a dark world. I'll be back with you next week here on Cure America, and we are going to keep trying to solve the problems in America, and we're going to, on this show, sort through the noise of the news to find some truth.